Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with New York Times bestselling author, speaker, and trainer Bridget Cook-Burch. Her clients call her the Book Whisperer. She is a New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestselling author, mentor, trainer, mama bear, humanitarian, and speaker known for riveting stories of transformation. Her powerful work has been showcased on Oprah, Dateline, CNN, Good Morning America, the History Channel, NPR, and many other outlets. She is the CEO and founder of YourInspiredStory.com. As a successful entrepreneur, Bridget has also owned and operated a multimillion-dollar trucking company. Her wisdom and stories are a must listen. Enjoy this interview.
Hey, it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking some time out today. I appreciate it.
You got it. I'm actually looking forward to this.
Yeah, me as well. So before we get into your life, as a New York Times best-selling author, speaker, trainer, a very busy existence, you know, I think looking at the calendar today, saying March 14th is probably a PTSD moment for a lot of people because 3 years ago, everything just stopped. And I'm curious now that we're coming out of it, how did you survive that time period and how does it change the way that you approach life and your business now?
Well, I think part of it is I just don't take anything for granted in business and life and relationships. I think it's super important to grasp every moment. I had a couple people that passed away from COVID, so that was difficult. All of my, not all, but quite a bit of my business was done through live events and then working with people afterwards. And so I had to completely scramble, revamp my business, made me stronger. It made my relationships stronger too. And, we found ways to be human. We found ways to connect. We found ways to absolutely choose different than, what perhaps the pandemic was telling us, not to go out and infect a whole bunch of people, but choose a different attitude, choose a different way of being, choose a different way to live with joy and choose joy no matter what. And that was, it became like this beautiful conscious choice of, wow, there's some hell and high water going on and, all the headlines and everything else. And what do I get to create today? What do I get to do to make a difference in the life of someone else? How can I rearrange or arrange or get creative to really bring something special to this world during this time?
I think that's the thing about it. A lot of who we were before this happened was going to get magnified. If you're positive, it was going to be positive. If you were negative, it was just going to be magnified. I mean, it was a monopoly situation. We had to figure it out. But yeah, there was definitely a lot of lessons that could have been learned if you embraced it.
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah. So let's get to the essence, the core of who you are as a worker, more specifically. And I'm going to put you hypothetically in front of a bunch of grade school kids at a career day. Let's say second, third graders. One of the kids looks up at you and says or asks, "What do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
That's one of my favorite. I have a course that I teach to kids called Right Juicy, and we get all excited. But if it was career day, back in the day, if I mentioned the word Oprah, everybody knew it. I had a few books and things that had been on Oprah, so everybody knew it. But what was fun with the kids is I would get them tapped into the magic of a story that they had read that had already changed their life. And, did you love that book? What did you love about it? And we would get into a discussion, and then I would say, I write books. And they may be a little bit different than what other people write, but what I love, and I would tell them, these are characters who have to face some pretty tremendous obstacles. And then they come out on the other side, and they're your special superheroes, and all the kids, faces would light up. And then I would let them know that they have that opportunity for themselves as well.
That's wonderful. When you were in the third grade, what was your dream? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, let's see. Tinker, Tailor, Spy. I was very adventurous. I was quite a tomboy. I did want to be a spy until I learned you actually had to kill people, and then that wasn't so fun. But wanted to be a writer in the mountains with my cat and my dog, and I thought that was way too far out of my reach. So I was looking at other things that I might be able to do and be. I came from a very conservative background where education was so important. And my dad was an engineer. My mom had been this amazing, an amazing school teacher. And they felt like education was the most important thing so that the whole world was at your fingertips and you could do whatever you wanted. So I thought about all kinds of things, from astronauts to being a fireman to everything. But I thought being a writer would be out of my reach. Isn't that funny?
Well, but the cool thing about how life works is that it's come full circle and you're living the dream that you had when you were a child.
Yes, indeed. I love it.
That's awesome.
I look out my window and I've got the beautiful snow-covered mountains and a dog at my feet, and anyway, I just love it. And I still get to work with glorious stories and magic and people all day long. It's lovely.
Yeah, sounds like it. Where exactly are you located on the planet?
I'm outside of Salt Lake City near the mountains, the ski resorts. So I have lovely views and gorgeous weather and lots of fun terrain to still be that adventurer and explorer.
Yeah, I actually drove from Colorado to San Diego this summer. Well, we went from Kansas City up to Colorado, and driving through Utah and all of that terrain, it's just eye candy everywhere. So
I would agree. I would agree. Some places are pretty desolate. There's some desert, we got to admit to, right? But there's a lot of beautiful, stunning imagery, the red rocks, the gorgeous mountains, trees, forests. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you've never seen anything blah until you've driven across Kansas. That will be something that will leave a mental scar.
That and parts of Wyoming, I would agree.
Man alive. I'd pass for that. So you kind of touched a little bit on your parents, and I want to get to your childhood a little bit more. Tell me where you were born and raised and how these seeds got in you to write and to be as highly motivated as you are.
Well, that's actually an interesting question. I was adopted when I was 6 months old, so I had 3 sets of parents by then. My birth parents, and then I had my foster parents, and then I was adopted into this incredible family. And so I was born in Laramie, Wyoming, and really didn't know too much until I came into this family, and they were raising a family in Brigham City, Utah, of all places, which is kind of funny. It's Mormonville, and my dad and mom were very Catholic, and my dad was that incredible engineer I was telling you about. He worked at Morton Thiokol, and he was a civil engineer that designed a lot of pool structures for a lot of things we see in the sky these days. So it was pretty incredible in that. I grew up Catholic in that Mormon town, thought about becoming a nun, had enough guilt to be a Jewish princess. It was a lot of fun. And then I ended up having a lot of extraordinary experiences in reading. You asked what I loved to think about as a kid, but I'll tell you what, I loved to read as a kid. But I read deeper stories than most people. Like, I read the gamut. I loved fantasy and all different kinds of fiction. But I also loved the true stories of Diary of Anne Frank and, some of the things like with Uncle Tom's Cabin and Man's Search for Meaning that most kids my age didn't even want to touch, but they were compelling and intriguing to me. And read out my entire library, read out the bookmobile, and then just started writing things that I wasn't seeing in the world, and that was really fun.
So, yeah, that's the beauty of reading. It really does do a lot of really good things for you. And I'm curious, what was the very first one, though, for you that really parted the curtains that made you think, wow, I either want to be a writer someday or I want to read everything I can get my hands on?
I do both. So how's that? I don't feel like I ever needed to make the choice. But it was interesting. I had a near-death experience when I was in my early 20s. It completely changed my life. And it changed my perspective of the world, of what I was here for, Oh my goodness. I could go on and on about it, but I will tell you this. In terms of story, it changed the story I was telling myself, about the world, about people. And I was no longer afraid of anyone. It was like I could look into the eyes of any person and I could see love there. Sometimes it was buried really far underneath. But it was fascinating to me to be able to unearth light in some of the darkest places. And I was working as a PR person, got to write stories for this incredible organization called Community Learning Centers. And I got to interview the kids that were stepping away from gang life and families, you know, with generations of gangs in their families, but they were stepping away, they were seeing a new life, and I fell in love with the human soul. It was so inspiring to me to think that you could be raised one way and that you could choose to go something completely different and, you know, be that maverick, sometimes the pariah, but to walk away and into something grand that you could then have a better life and pass on to your own kids and break those cycles. So I became addicted. I started writing these incredible stories, and I thought I was going to write a fictional novel from my very first book. And I had a dream even about it with like eye color and what this guy looked like. And, you know, of course it was a love story, but it's this kid who walks away from his gang and has to figure out how to be redeemed and how to forgive himself and how to feel forgiven by God, but actually transform into a better person. And he's got a price tag on his head and all these things. Well, I wrote all this out, and then I had to do research on it, little at a time. I was a young mom with little kids, and come to find out, this guy was real. The dream that I had, the hero of my fictional story, was actually a real-life hero. And I got in contact with him. I'm like, because on his website, he says, I'm looking for someone to write my life story. If you know someone, give him a call. Have him give me a call. And I was dying because I was like, how do you tell this guy, hey, I've already written your book? But we had a great conversation, and he already had a writer from Newsweek. But then when that fell through, he called me back. And that was my first book, and I've been hooked ever since. Like, I will never, not until I'm 140 years old and I, you know, sip my last breath, will I not have at least another book in me.
That's wonderful. So I'm curious, you know, all of us we're all lifted up by the people that we admire. Who's been a hero for you in your life?
I've had several. I told you about my almost becoming a nun, right? Yeah. So Mother Teresa was some, and I'm sure you've heard this 1,000 times, but I really had an fascination for her. And at one point she said, I am the pen in the hand of a God who is writing a love letter to the world. And I thought, that's incredible, because that could be a book. It could be how you treat your neighbor. It could be, you know, how you conduct business, because I'm very much into that and doing that with an integral style, like all of those things. And she's been a real hero to me. There's also been Nelson Mandela, and I'll tell you why. Because he had a particular mindset at one time, and he thought that there was only one way to solve a problem, to rid the country of the issues that were taking place. He really was very adamant. And then he had one of the hardest things that could befall any of us, and that is to be put into a prison where you're treated so poorly. And he could have become more angry, more bitter, more disgusted, and either died inside, or when he came out, to really not do much in the world at all. And you know, just live that life of a living death. But he transformed himself, and then he transformed an entire nation. And that's the power of one person. So I have a lot of heroes, and it's each person that has taken a look at what life has to offer, and they choose to do something remarkable in spite of what those difficulties are.
So if you could write a dream biography on anybody alive on the planet right now, who would you love to write about?
Can I share with you? I just finished publishing one.
What's that?
The guy's name is Gary Lee Price, and he's a world-renowned sculptor. And we just finished his memoir. It's called Divine Turbulence, Navigating the Amorphous Winds of Life. And I just got to tell you, this guy, like, he was raised on an army base in Mannheim, Germany, and his stepfather took his mother in a murder-suicide. He goes from the frying pan into this fiery den of torment in Montpelier, Idaho, of all places, and no one knows because all the adults are working nights. And so, you know, there came a point where he was being enslaved, where he was having to do horrible and horrific things, and he became emancipated, and he had to decide if he was going to be a bitter person or a better person for what he'd been through. And he found spirituality, and he also found art. He became a renowned painter in the local area. And then he found clay, and clay was like this thing, this visceral thing that he could put his hands on and shape into magnificent things. And what's amazing about it, Joe, is that he was able to take this and to create artwork that's seen all around the world in many, many, many different countries, Hong Kong Library and outside the Vatican, and in churches and cathedrals and arboretums and cemeteries and corporate offices. But at one point, he was asked by one of Stephen Covey's guys if he would create a statue of responsibility, because Dr. Viktor Frankl, who had survived 3 concentration camps, he loved the United States, but he said, you know, the United States needs to have a statue of responsibility on the West Coast to bookend the Statue of Liberty on the East Coast, because you cannot have liberty without responsibility. And you've seen that, you know, during COVID and the outbreak of COVID and where we've been coming as a nation. What I love about this is that he fulfilled Dr. Viktor Frankl's dream. And the statue is going to be going up in the next few years on the West Coast, and we'll be seeing it in our lifetime. Like, it's extraordinary. So it was one of my most favorite, most beautiful stories ever to write.
So with all of this motivation you have to capture stories and to make stories and all of these things that you genuinely feel, what is the ultimate motivator? After you get up out of bed and start living your day and go through your day, what is it that drives you through your days?
I have just seen over and over and over the power of one person to do extraordinary things. And I have seen, like, when I've crawled into a little ball and gone back to bed and you know, decided not to live very much for that day. But I've also seen when I've had the ability to go out and to absolutely inspire someone else to take on their life to the highest degree. Because it's happened to me. Because I've been affected by so many people and books and mentors and stories. And so, you know, I love in your podcast how you call this, let's open the story portal. That's what gives me so much excitement and joy, is that we are made of stories. And how do we connect and how do we learn is through that portal of stories. We remember stories, not statistics. And we connect with each other, we vibe with each other, we also grow together. And so if I can help to create a world of magnificent storytellers who have an impact, who have a footprint, who are able to really create change in their world, and then it expands out into their community, into their nation, into the world, then I have lived my purpose.
And that's the beauty, I think, of modern podcasting, and thankfully it's become such a big thing, is that I think it's creating a lot of therapeutic undertows. I think there's a lot of us that can connect and find empathy and find joy in the fact that, especially in this much politically divided world that we live in, it's almost kind of like we went through here in Kansas City when the Chiefs won. It's like we had the parade, we had this mass gathering of people, and we all just came together for a common purpose. And I think that's the one thing that's so good about stories, about opening that portal up, that podcasting allows us to do that. It's a really good therapeutic function for us to get involved with.
And you've certainly interviewed some really creative characters between the music and the writing and so many other things. And it's a way that we can inspire each other and be unified in something greater than, the local argument or the worldwide one,
Yeah. Yep, it gets old after a while. So everyone out there, so I'm curious, of all of the things that you've accomplished, and you've accomplished a lot in your life, at the end of the proverbial day, when you look back and think about everything you've done, what are you the proudest of?
Every story I've had an opportunity to write and to get out into the world. When World War II happened, and I just was at the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem, and one of the things that hit me so hard, and I began to sob, was there was this disintegration of people, and it was horrific, as you know, and that was such a terrible thing. But they also showed the burning of books. They also showed, people who decided that they weren't going to be interested with the inner workings or stories or thoughts of other people of a certain kind, and they were burning all those books. And why that was so difficult for me was because I know what it takes to write a book. It's not simple. 9 out of 10 people want to write a book, but less than 2%, 3% ever get it done. And so, to see something that magnificent just be cast into the fire. But then also on the other side of that, the most proud that I have ever been is to help someone get their story out into the world, because it is a lasting legacy. Stories and books can, if they're done well, they can live far beyond us into creating that greater world for generations. And, we've seen that with certain books that you hear about over and over and over again, like Man's Search for Meaning. Dr. Viktor Frankl is long gone, but his legacy continues to live on, and he's studied by so many people and celebrated and acclaimed, and these wonderful conversations continue. That's what I'm most proud of, is that, we open that story portal, but then the conversations can continue, for generations. And that's what I'm most proud of.
I've talked to, there was a local jazz musician, her name is Molly Hammer, and she passed right before the pandemic began due to cancer. And I interviewed her a few times, and I remember her at one point telling me that after she beat it the first time, she had a new lease on life. She traveled, and I will never forget her saying that, I used to say no to gigs, and now I say yes. I say yes all the time. And I wonder, with someone, as you had mentioned, going through a near-death experience, what was that like? We all hear about seeing the light and seeing and feeling different things, but what ultimately was it that you went through that fundamentally changed the way that you lived your life and proceed today?
Well, and the story I was telling myself, because before I went into the hospital, I was working 3 jobs. I was going to school. I was doing everything I could to, please my parents, but to live up to really an impossible set of expectations that I thought the world had for me. And I just wasn't living it. I wasn't doing it. I wasn't getting perfect grades. I could barely pay my bills. I was struggling with debt. Didn't have a wonderful full-time boyfriend at the time. And going to school, just like all of those things culminated together in feeling like I was worth nothing. And when I had that near-death experience in the hospital, Joe, I've got to tell you that I came out of that being given a second chance at life, being shown that one of the medications I was taking was killing me. Nobody knew. And that I had, like your friend, this incredible musician, I had the opportunity. Was I going to throw that away, or was I going to do something extraordinary with it? And I chose to go out there and do something extraordinary. And I'm superhuman, meaning that my humanness can oftentimes get the best of me. But now I have a sense, too, of co-creation. Like, we're here to create together. We're here to do extraordinary things, and we're all connected. And we can tug on certain strings and create issues and more irritation, or we can tug on certain strings and awaken each other and open each other to a greater way of living and connecting and creating. You know, you get to work with a lot of artists, and, you know, to hear the stories of where did that muse come from and what was your idea behind that? I came out of that hospital with 7 billion ideas because every person has a story, and I knew there would never be an end to what I could write.
So everyone out there ultimately has an idea of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your fans, but ultimately you live your life. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
An artist, a lover of people who sometimes makes really stupid mistakes, but still continues to love. And I like to think of myself as that pen in the hand of a God who is writing a love letter to the world.
Wow, well said. So let's leave this on a triumphant note here. What has been one of the best letters, responses, so to speak, that you've gotten from your work?
Oh, man. There's been a lot. I will tell you this. I had a book, came out on Oprah. I was giving a speech about handling and healing the skeletons in your family closet. I'd written a book about the daughter of a serial killer and how she overcame her past. And I got down from the stage and I was talking to several people, and this one woman came up to me and she said, I was going to take my life today. And I told God that if there was something redeeming, if there was something worth staying alive for today, that I would do it. She said, so I went to the newspaper. I saw that you were speaking. I had really no idea what this was about, but I came and she said, I am going home and I have a new lease on life. I have just realized I have no reason to take my life. And that was such a beautiful thing to know that here I am just telling the process of someone else's story coming to life, and how beautiful that was and how freeing, and that it saved a life. It blew me out of the water. It was amazing. So that will remain one of my favorite stories.
Wow, that's amazing. That's ground shaking right there. So, Bridget, if anyone wants to buy your book, learn more about you, get involved with anything related to your world, where is the best place for them to go?
Well, I would love to see them and know more about their stories. And so you can go to yourinspiredstory.com. That's the very best place to reach out to me.
Wow, this has been wonderful. It's been an honor. I really appreciate you opening up your world. There's so much profound statements and stories and ideas that came through. So thank you for being so open and generous with that. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube, subscribe to us there, and you can also find us at Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.